Your Honor. I speak 9 languages. The courtroom fell silent, then erupted in laughter. Judge Harrison Cole leaned back in his chair, a slow smirk spreading across his face as the gallery joined in, amused and dismissive. 9 languages, he scoffed. This is a federal courtroom, not a talent show. Do you think we're here to be entertained? Imani Brooks didn't react. Standing in an orange detention uniform, her hands cuffed in front of her, she met the judge's gaze without blinking. To everyone watching, she was just another young black woman in custody, no credentials, no influence, no reason to be taken seriously. What they couldn't see was the discipline behind her calm. The years of survival. The intelligence forged in silence while the world underestimated her. This wasn't about languages. It was about who gets believed, and who gets laughed at. And before the hearing was over, Judge Harrison Cole would regret every second of that laughter. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Pemberton rises with the confidence of a man holding a winning hand. His suit is impeccable, his briefcase expensive leather, his voice calibrated for maximum authority. Your Honor, this is as open and shut as immigration fraud cases come, he begins, spreading documents across the prosecution table like evidence of an inevitable verdict. The charges roll out with devastating precision. Falsification of educational credentials to secure a work visa. Defrauding Meridian Consulting Group of over $340,000. Impersonating a certified translator in high-stakes international negotiations where millions of dollars and diplomatic relationships hung in the balance. Pemberton paints his picture with broad, damning strokes. He describes Imani as a clever scammer who exploited America's generous immigration system, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. He emphasizes what she lacks: no university degrees from recognized institutions, no formal certifications, no credentials that the system understands or respects. Her background from one of Lagos's most impoverished neighborhoods becomes evidence itself, as if poverty and fraud were natural companions. The impossibility of her claims hangs in the air like an accusation. 9 languages. Self-taught. From someone with her background. Pemberton doesn't even need to say it's absurd, his tone does the work for him. The evidence he presents seems to close every escape route. Meridian's complaint details numerous instances of inadequate translation, missed cultural nuances that cost clients thousands, unprofessional conduct that endangered sensitive negotiations. 3 other companies have filed similar complaints, each one another nail in the coffin of her credibility. Imani sits motionless at the defendant's table, her cuffed hands folded in a posture that could be resignation or infinite patience. The orange detention uniform does its work. In America, orange means guilty before the gavel ever falls. Behind her, the gallery benches stretch empty of support. No family flew across an ocean to stand with her. No expensive lawyer leans close with whispered strategy. She looks exactly like what Pemberton claims she is, a nobody who reached too high and is about to fall. Judge Harrison Cole has presided over immigration court for 14 years, and in that time he's cultivated a reputation as carefully as other men cultivate gardens. He sees himself as a guardian standing against a tide, the endless wave of fraud he believes washes up on America's shores with every plane that lands, every border that's crossed. When Imani speaks, her voice quiet but clear, Your Honor, with respect, I speak 9 languages, Cole doesn't just dismiss her claim. He performs his dismissal, playing to an audience he knows is watching. 9 languages, he repeats, his voice soaked in theatrical disbelief, each word landing like a punchline. Let me guess, Ms. Brooks, you learned them all on YouTube. Or perhaps there's a phone app for that now. The gallery responds with obedient laughter, the kind that seeks approval from power. This court deals in facts, in verifiable credentials, in reality. Not in the fantasies of people who think they can talk their way into a country that demands excellence. He's said similar things dozens of times before. His clerks have heard variations of this speech. The lawyers who practice before him know to expect it. But this time, something different is happening. In the back row of the gallery, a young law student has her phone angled just right, recording. The clip is 37 seconds long. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, it will be on Twitter. By 6, it will have 50,000 views. By tomorrow morning, Judge Harrison Cole will be a hashtag, a symbol, a viral embodiment of everything broken in the American immigration system. But he doesn't know that yet. Right now, in this moment, he's enjoying himself. The power feels good. The laughter feels like validation. The woman in orange looks appropriately diminished. Let's proceed with the facts, shall we? He says, nodding toward Pemberton with the camaraderie of men who understand each other. Real facts, not linguistic fairy tales. The gavel comes down. The show continues. And history begins recording without his permission. Douglas Hartman takes the witness stand with the polished ease of a man accustomed to being believed. As senior vice president of Meridian Consulting Group, he carries institutional credibility like a badge. His suit probably costs more than Imani earned in her first 6 months working for his company. We pride ourselves on diversity, Hartman says, his voice smooth as boardroom presentations. We thought we were giving Ms. Brooks an opportunity, helping someone achieve the American dream despite her unconventional background. He pauses for effect. Instead, we got incompetence masked as expertise. The incidents he describes are specific, detailed, damning. A German automotive contract where Imani allegedly mistranslated critical technical specifications, costing the client tens of thousands in manufacturing errors. A Mandarin negotiation where she supposedly missed essential cultural protocols, nearly torpedoing a multi-million-dollar deal. A French legal document where her translation was, in his words, barely coherent, the kind of work you'd expect from a first-year language student, not a professional translator. Each accusation comes with documentation. Printed complaints on official letterhead. Client emails expressing concern and frustration. Damage assessments calculating the cost of her supposed incompetence. The pile of evidence grows, and with each new page, Imani's guilt seems more certain. The pattern appears clear as daylight, a woman in over her head, faking abilities she didn't possess, leaving destruction in her wake. But then Pemberton asks about timing, and something shifts. Hartman explains that all these complaints were filed within a 2-week period, exactly 1 week after Imani's contract with Meridian officially ended. For 2 years before that, across dozens of assignments, there had been no complaints. Not one. Then suddenly, an avalanche of them, all at once, from multiple companies, in perfect coordination. Imani's lips curve into the faintest smile, barely perceptible. She leans toward James Chen, the young public defender who's been assigned to her case and looks perpetually overwhelmed by its complexity. She whispers something, her words too quiet for anyone else to hear. Chen's expression shifts, confusion first, then concern, then something that might be hope beginning to kindle. During the recess, James Chen stands in the courthouse hallway, phone pressed to his ear, still not entirely certain why he's making this call. But something in Imani's voice when she gave him the name and number carried such absolute confidence that refusing felt impossible. Attorney Margaret Okonkwo, he says, stumbling slightly over the pronunciation. This is James Chen, public defender in Brooklyn Immigration Court. I have a client named Imani Brooks, and she said you'd want to know about this case. The response is immediate, sharp with urgency. What courtroom? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tell them nothing until I arrive. Do you understand me? Nothing. James looks back through the courtroom window at Imani, seeing her with new eyes. Who is Margaret Okonkwo? Someone who understands what's really happening here, Imani says simply, and her calm is absolute. When court resumes, Judge Cole's irritation is immediate and visible. A new attorney is requesting to be heard, disrupting his carefully managed proceedings. Margaret Okonkwo enters like weather changing, a striking Nigerian-American woman in her 50s, carrying a leather briefcase that costs more than James makes in a month. Her presence commands the room without effort. Behind her, 2 others follow, a distinguished white-haired man in an elegant European suit, and a young Asian woman with a laptop bag that looks serious and professional. "Your Honor," Margaret says, her British Nigerian accent clear, authoritative, allowing no interruption. "I'm filing an emergency motion to enter this case as Ms. Brooks' counsel of record. I'm also requesting a continuance of 48 hours to present new evidence that will entirely reframe these proceedings." Judge Cole's face darkens like storm clouds gathering. "Counsel, this court doesn't appreciate theatrical entrances. And this counsel doesn't appreciate federal courts being used as instruments of corporate fraud, Your Honor." Margaret's voice cuts clean through his objection. "I have in my possession evidence of a systematic scheme to exploit and then criminalize immigrant contractors. If this court proceeds without examining that evidence, you'll be facilitating not justice, but a coordinated attack on vulnerable workers." The courtroom goes silent. Not the performative silence of before, but something heavier, charged with possibility. For the first time since this hearing began, the outcome is uncertain. During the continuance, the truth begins to unspool like thread from a carefully hidden spool. Margaret explains her connection to Imani in the small conference room where they've gathered, away from the courtroom's judgment and performance. 2 years ago, Margaret had been arguing a human rights case before an international tribunal, a complex matter involving Nigerian environmental activists and multinational oil companies. She needed a translator who could handle not just English and multiple Nigerian languages, but also the technical legal terminology and cultural nuances that could make or break testimony. Someone recommended Imani Brooks. What Margaret witnessed over those 3 weeks stunned her. This wasn't just fluency. This was cultural intelligence operating at a level Margaret had rarely encountered, the ability to capture not just words but intent, not just meaning but context, not just translation but transformation of ideas across linguistic boundaries. When Margaret learned of Imani's arrest, she immediately suspected something beyond simple fraud allegations. She'd heard whispers about Meridian Consulting before, rumors in the immigrant rights community about a pattern of hiring contractors from vulnerable populations, extracting their labor at below-market rates, and then disposing of them through legal mechanisms before final payments came due. The white-haired man is Dr. Wilhelm Strauss, a German member of European Parliament for whom Imani had provided translation during complex EU-Nigeria trade negotiations. He's flown from Brussels specifically for this hearing. His schedule cleared because he understood immediately that something unjust was happening. The young woman is Sarah Kim, a digital forensics investigator who's been quietly building a case against Meridian for 6 months, following a trail of exploited contractors that stretches across 3 continents. Together, they've assembled something devastating. When court reconvenes, Margaret stands with the bearing of someone who knows she holds the winning hand. "Your Honor, what we're about to present isn't just a defense of Ms. Brooks. It's an indictment of a system that preys on people precisely like her, extraordinarily talented individuals from non-Western backgrounds who lack the institutional credentials that American gatekeepers demand, even when their abilities far exceed those of credentialed competitors." Judge Cole's face suggests he's beginning to understand that this case has shifted beneath him like tectonic plates moving. Dr. Wilhelm Strauss takes the witness stand with the gravitas of 4 decades in international diplomacy. His testimony is methodical, precise, and utterly damning to the prosecution's narrative. "I have worked with translators across 4 decades representing Germany in international negotiations," he says in precise, accented English. "Ms. Brooks is among the top 3 I have ever encountered. Her command of German is not merely fluent, it is culturally sophisticated in ways that cannot be faked or approximated." He elaborates with specific examples. "She understands Hochdeutsch, Swiss German, and Austrian variants. During negotiations, she caught subtleties in word choice that revealed underlying negotiating positions, subtleties that his own German staff, native speakers with university degrees, had missed entirely." He produces a letter, signed by 15 EU officials, testifying to Imani's extraordinary work during the trade negotiations. "When I learned she had been accused of incompetence in German translation," Dr. Strauss says, his voice carrying quiet outrage, "I knew immediately that someone was lying. The question was why?" Then comes the video testimony that shifts the entire courtroom's energy. Chen Wei, CEO of Pacific Bridge Industries, listed in the prosecution's documents as one of the companies filing complaints about Imani's Mandarin work, appears on the screen visibly angry. "I never authorized any complaint against Ms. Brooks," he states, his frustration evident even through translation. "Her work was excellent. When Meridian approached us claiming she had falsified her credentials and that we needed to file complaints to protect ourselves from legal liability, we refused. We told them directly that we wanted to hire her as an independent contractor." He pauses, and his next words detonate like explosives. 2 weeks later, someone from Meridian filed a complaint using forged documentation with my company's letterhead. We discovered this only when your office contacted us for verification. We have filed our own complaint against Meridian for fraud and forgery. The courtroom erupts. Voices rise in disbelief and anger. Judge Cole's gavel comes down repeatedly, demanding order, but his face has gone pale, no longer flushed with the confidence of authority, but drained by the realization that his court has been used. Pemberton is on his feet, objecting, but his voice lacks conviction. He's beginning to understand he's been played. Sarah Kim takes the stand, and her testimony is surgical in its precision. She's a digital forensics investigator, and for the past 6 months, she's been building a case through a whistleblower lawsuit that has given her access to Meridian's internal communications. What she reveals is a paper trail of deliberate exploitation spanning 3 years. She projects emails onto the courtroom screen. The first is from Douglas Hartman to Meridian's HR director. The immigration cleanup protocol should focus on contractors within 90 days of visa renewal. File complaints after final deliverables are submitted but before final payment is due. Legal says this protects us from payment obligations and eliminates competition from undercutting our rates. Another email, from Meridian's general counsel, targeting foreign nationals without U.S. degrees gives us maximum leverage. Immigration courts are predisposed to doubt them, and they typically lack resources for adequate legal defense. The return on investment is significant. Then comes the spreadsheet, a document so coldly calculating it draws audible gasps from the gallery. 47 immigrant contractors tracked over 3 years, with columns labeled Exploitation Window, Complaint Filed, and Immigration Status Terminated. Imani Brooks is number 43 on the list. Each row represents a human being, each number represents a life disrupted or destroyed. Sarah walks the court through the pattern. Meridian systematically hired talented immigrant contractors, paid them 60% below market rates for high-quality work, extracted their labor for contracts worth millions, and then orchestrated their removal from the country to avoid final payments and eliminate them as competitive threats. It wasn't fraud. It was a business model. Pemberton requests an immediate sidebar with Judge Cole. Both men approach the bench, and though their conversation is hushed, their body language tells the story. Pemberton's shoulders are slumped. Cole's face is ashen. They're both realizing they've been instruments in a conspiracy that has now been exposed in open court, on the record, possibly being recorded for the world to see. When they return, the trial's trajectory has irrevocably changed. What began as Imani's judgment has become someone else's reckoning entirely. Margaret stands, her voice clear and formal. "Your Honor, my client has been called a fraud, a scammer, a liar. She's been laughed at, dismissed, and shackled in your courtroom. I believe she deserves the opportunity to demonstrate precisely who she is." Judge Cole, thoroughly rattled now, can only nod his consent. There's nothing else he can do. Imani stands. For the first time since entering this courtroom, her restraints have been removed. She approaches the witness stand with quiet dignity, her spine straight, her head high. What happens next will be replayed millions of times across social media, dissected in law schools, referenced in future immigration cases. Margaret has arranged for native speakers of 9 languages to appear via video link. One by one, they engage Imani in increasingly complex conversations. A Beijing linguistics professor discusses classical Chinese poetry in Mandarin, referencing Tang Dynasty literary conventions and tonal nuances. Imani responds fluently, her tones precise, even correcting the professor's pronunciation at one point. The professor laughs with genuine delight. Dr. Strauss engages her in rapid German, discussing Kant's critique of pure reason. Imani not only keeps pace but quotes passages from memory, her German accent shifting subtly to match his formal register. A Sorbonne literature professor asks her to translate Molière in French, then explain the wordplay. Imani does so, then spontaneously translates the same passage into Arabic while maintaining the rhythmic structure, a feat the professor calls extraordinary. The demonstrations continue: Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish, Swahili, Igbo, Yoruba. With each language, something remarkable happens. Imani doesn't just translate words, she inhabits each language completely. Her facial expressions shift. Her gestures adapt. Her entire demeanor reflects the cultural context of each tongue. This isn't performance. This is who she is, revealed. The courtroom has fallen completely silent. Even Judge Cole has stopped pretending to review documents. He's simply watching, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that might be shame, might be awe, might be the beginning of understanding how profoundly wrong he's been. When the final video link disconnects, Margaret asks one more question: Ms. Brooks, where did you learn these languages? Imani's answer is simple, powerful, true: I learned them because I had to. Because language was the only currency I had. Because in Lagos, if you can speak to the Chinese businessmen and the German engineers and the French diplomats, you can survive. Because I learned that words are power, and power doesn't only belong to people with degrees from universities they can't afford. I learned them because I refuse to be invisible. The aftermath is swift and merciless, like justice finally arriving after being delayed too long. Pemberton stands, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, the government moves to dismiss all charges against Ms. Brooks with prejudice. He's clearly trying to distance himself from the debacle, claiming he was misled by Meridian's false complaints, but no one in the courtroom is fooled. He built his case on a foundation he never bothered to verify. Judge Harrison Cole faces a more difficult reckoning. The video of his mockery has gone viral, 3.2 million views by the time the hearing concludes. Legal associations are calling for investigations. Immigrant rights groups are demanding he be removed from the bench. His clerks are fielding calls from journalists. His legacy, whatever he imagined it would be, is being rewritten in real time. He stands, and for a long moment the courtroom holds its breath, waiting to see what kind of man he'll choose to be in this moment of exposure. Ms. Brooks, he says, his voice stripped of its earlier theatrical confidence, I owe you an apology that no words can adequately convey. I allowed prejudice, my own unconscious biases about who possesses legitimate expertise, to color my judgment before hearing evidence. You are clearly not only innocent of these charges but extraordinarily gifted in ways that I, in my arrogance, refuse to see. He pauses, and the next words cost him something visible. I have presided over thousands of immigration cases. I wonder now how many others I dismissed too quickly, judged too harshly, because they didn't fit my narrow conception of credibility. That burden will stay with me. The charges against Meridian Consulting begin immediately. Federal prosecutors launch investigations into labor trafficking, wire fraud, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Douglas Hartman is fired within days, within weeks, he's facing criminal charges. The company hemorrhages clients. Within 6 months, Meridian Consulting Group will cease to exist. Immigration courts across the country begin reviewing cases where defendants were dismissed as incredible, despite extraordinary abilities. The case becomes precedent, legal, cultural, transformational. Imani finds herself overwhelmed with offers. The UN wants her. NGOs compete for her attention. Universities offer fellowships. But she chooses something else, a position with the International Labor Rights Forum investigating exploitation of immigrant workers, and she creates a non-profit called 9 Languages, offering free services to immigrants facing deportation and exploitation. She stands before a university auditorium filled with immigrant students, and she tells them, "They laughed at me because the system is designed to make people like us seem less credible. But we're not here to prove ourselves to systems built to exclude us. We're here to change those systems entirely." The applause is thunderous, and somewhere in another courtroom, a judge remembers this moment and listens more carefully to an accented voice.